Hello Reapers, my name's Seth, and today we're going to be taking a look at PixARK, overanalyzing the trailer, overanalyzing the screenshots and stuff like that, because I wouldn't really consider myself a pro as far as ARK is concerned, but I have put in like over 200 hours into ARK, so I'm obviously very excited about a pixelated version of ARK, especially because there's another game that I run on the channel called Trove that a lot of people are actually comparing PixARK to. Even though the games themselves are going to be vastly different, I do have a video kind of comparing the two and talking about some different features and stuff that we know of thus far. But for today, we're going to be focusing on just the screenshots, the trailer and stuff like that, because there's a lot of things that I'm talking about from my own personal experience with ARK that I've been noticing in a lot of these screenshots and stuff like that. So first of all, let's just start going through the trailer. I'm going to pause the video accordingly to overanalyze certain segments as well. So right at the beginning, we actually see this character parachuting in, or should I say ballooning in. That implies to me that this is probably going to end up being how your character ends up spawning in the world, but I ended up hearing from a good friend of mine, Merc, who said that there's going to end up being kind of a similar PUBG or Battle Royale from Fortnite game mode, where you're going to end up dropping in and fighting against all the other players on the random generated map. So there is going to end up definitely being that competitive side. And also you can notice immediately that this game isn't just going to end up being a game made by the ARK developers that's very similar to ARK. This is actually like a pixelated version of ARK, or a voxel version of ARK, I should say, because if you look in the background right there, you can see the red obelisk. And if we end up taking a look over at the Steam page right here, there was a screenshot that I ended up noticing right away. This one right here, where you can see on our character's wrist, we actually have the little, I don't know, whatever that thing is called that you have on your wrist in the ARK game. Also, you can notice that the gun seems to be almost identical to the long neck rifle that you can actually end up getting in ARK as well. So potentially we could see this being the tranquilizer weapon of the game, because obviously the game does advertise that you're going to be able to tame animals and ride them accordingly. We do see some new types of creatures right here. We got this kind of two-headed dog or chimera or something, also being in a voxel lava biome, which does imply that the game is going to end up obviously having different biomes and stuff. One of the things that I personally love about the art style of the game is that they're not afraid to use 3D props mixed with voxels. So you can see like the trees and stuff like that in the background are going to end up being very distinct and very different than you know, the rest of the world being all pixelated and voxel and stuff. So anyways, let's continue with the trailer here. All right, so we got a Griffin, which obviously was a creature that you ended up getting in ARK as well, that ended up coming out with the Ragnarok map, as far as I recall. So obviously we're going to see this thing being a mount that you can end up actually flying around with. Hopefully it's going to end up having some tweaks to the controls that we could see with some of the flying creatures, most notably with the dragons. I hope they don't turn like trucks like they do in the ARK game. But you can see immediately all the different resources that are around. There's these crystals that are in the background that you will see a little further on in the trailer. And it does seem like the crystals here are kind of generating inside, you know, caves, like natural formed caves and stuff like that. And if you kind of take a little bit of a look up here in the dark area, you can see that there's all sorts of different types of ore. And then down at the bottom is that ice. So maybe this is going to end up being an ice biome. You can kind of tell that this is actually an ice biome because right up here on the tree, you can see a bunch of snow. But then in the background, we kind of see vines and stuff like that. So maybe it's kind of like a jungle biome right between a frost biome. And then over here already looking like ARK, looking absolutely beautiful. I love the glowing eyes of the dinosaurs, which means that you could potentially end up seeing these things at the nighttime. You know, is that going to end up being a thing where you could tell, like, you see these big, greedy red eyes and you know instantly, oh no, this is a T-Rex. I'm dead. But we see the Bronto, and then we see these other guys down here, which obviously are kind of staple hold ARK creatures. And then if we end up going back to the ARK screenshots, you can see right here that the Bronto not only does have a saddle, meaning that it is rideable, but we see very similarly to ARK, a Bronto saddle that actually lets you build a base on it. So it's going to be a platform saddle, right? Very, very cool that they actually have that. And further than what we ended up having in ARK with its kind of broken building system, outside of using mods like the S+ mod and stuff like that, those would end up making the building mechanics a lot better for ARK. This straight up just shows pixel building, you know, like Minecraft, voxels and stuff like that. Also, we actually take a little bit of a look here and you can see that there's a ladder that blatantly lets you climb up into this saddle area right here, because otherwise in ARK, the only way that you could end up getting onto the base is you pretty much had to have a flying creature in order to actually do so, right? And of course, these trees look very, very distinct and very different, so I'm wondering whether or not they're going to end up giving different pieces of resources, or is it all just going to end up being wood? You can also see in the background right here that this clearly is not the blue obelisk, but instead looks like it's going to take the same thing from ARK in loot crate drops. So that's going to end up being a loot drop that's going to drop down, and your character level is going to end up determining whether you can actually unlock it or not, because the game does in fact have character leveling, and from what I hear, has different skill trees that you can end up going down, but we'll talk about that in a little bit further in the video. So you can see here, we've got underwater. Absolutely awesome that they've got that. We see another similar dolphin creature that is in the ARK game, and then this other weird creature which, oh, that's a Manta Ray. Okay, I didn't even notice just because of the angle that it had, but you can see on the character we've got scuba gear going on. Not only do we have the scuba gear just on the back, but we also have paddles for his feet, whatever they're called. I completely forget. But in either case, that's going to end up being different resources and items that you can end up crafting, which means that the underwater area is definitely going to end up being fleshed out by confirming right here, right now, that there are going to be underwater creatures, which means that most likely we're going to end up seeing very similar resources, maybe ore, not ore, oil and pearls and stuff like that, right? So if we continue a little bit further, you can see that the building mechanics are very, very, I mean, it's just a voxel game, right? So we've kind of got this, you know, building everything one block at a time, no idea whether or not we're going to have big pre-built objects or anything like that. I wouldn't expect it, just because we are talking about ARK and they do like you building everything one at a time. However, you can notice that these are kind of foundation blocks, or maybe they're supposed to be tables, but I think that it's supposed to be foundation blocks, very similar to ARK, where you have to put down a foundation in order to actually build walls on top of it. Now, the fact that these are just one voxel each does mean that we are going to end up having quite a bit of building in front of us to actually make a proper house, because you can see they ended up filling up the whole bottom floor before they ended up building all the walls. Now, I'm hoping that the foundation is not necessarily going to end up being this ugly, because personally speaking, I think that not only as far as vanity, you know, of course you could end up covering up the edges of the house itself, but wouldn't this end up being very taxing on a computer, because it would end up having to load all of those different stilts that are going on, or the legs of the table, right? But still, it's very cool, and we kind of see that there are going to be stair blocks right out of the gate, because so many voxel games come out and you'd be surprised how many of them don't actually have staircases. No idea whether or not it's going to actually be rotating staircases, but who knows. We do see some prop items though. We see a door that is probably being made out of the same wood that the walls are being made out of, and the windows and stuff like that, and then a fence right here, which the door of course is something that you can activate and open. But we do see within the next scene here that this looks like a very similar house, and if it isn't the exact same house, it does mean that we do have the option of painting, because we see that the same door and similar windows, I don't know if they're the exact same. Let's actually take a quick little peek here. So the windows here you can kind of see, and the door in fact, are very different from the next scene. So we kind of see that the door itself looks similar, but it doesn't have the same blocks of wood, the planks on it. And then the windows themselves look a little bit more fancy. So time will tell whether or not that's going to end up being just a different resource, a different design. But at the least, we do know that we have different design options. This could even very well be like a stone door and stone windows or something. Honestly, who knows? But if we do take a look at the roof here and how it's being designed, it doesn't look like they're actually putting these staircases upside down. So I'm wondering whether or not this is going to be a similar game to most other voxel games, where unfortunately we're not going to end up seeing upside down staircases and the like. So in our scene right here shows that we've got a frost dungeon in the background. I'll more talk about this in a minute, why we actually know that this is a generated dungeon and not just player built. But then we also have all of the players kind of huddled around a fireplace. We see a bunch of different armor on the characters, including fur armor, which was something very similar in ARK. I'm expecting is going to be required in this game, where you go into the frost areas, you're going to have to worry about your character's temperature. You can end up freezing to death, and you're going to end up not only having to use fire and torches and stuff, but you're going to have that fur armor in order to actually protect yourself. We can see that again in the background. We've got another loot drop coming in, and one thing that I think is really interesting is that the game isn't pitch black as far as the nighttime is concerned. You can actually see a lot of the stuff that's going on in the background, which is a big deal for me, not only as a YouTuber, but just as a gamer in general, because I cannot stand pitch black nighttime. Like, it seriously is disgusting. Now see right here, we can see see the same dungeon that was in the background of that last scene being played in right here, because if you actually look closely, a lot of these characters are wearing the same armor that we just saw previously. There was the character that had a wizard's hat and the fur armor. There he is. And then on the right side of the screen, we can see the character rocking all fur armor. And if you look in the background, you can see kind of the columns that were going to be the outside of this ice castle. So hashtag confirmed, the game is going to end up actually generating with dungeons. So that's absolutely awesome. And we actually see this new creature right here who's kind of going to be like a frost Yeti. No idea whether or not he's going to end up being like a unique boss to the area, or if he's just another enemy that you can end up fighting. Whether it's going to be tameable or not, who knows? Because with Ark, when you would end up going into dungeons, none of those creatures were tameable. They were specific monsters that you would fight not only to level up your character, but also to give you trouble so that you could end up, you know, you had to fight them pretty much on foot in most cases. Sometimes you could take a creature into it. You see with this castle, obviously it's very open, so we could end up taking like a dragon or some type of an air creature to deal with these guys very, very easily. And we'll see whether or not the PixARK is going to end up having the same mechanic where you go into a dungeon, grab an artifact so that you can end up summoning the bosses. I don't know. But now we can see in a very, very similar looking ice place, we've got kind of a big snow gorilla, and he looks really, really tough. He might even end up being the dungeon boss, because now you can actually see that they're underground. Like, clearly they're just underground in an area where it's, you know, void of life, void of light, all frozen and everything like that. Very, very cool that we got a creature like that in the game, though, and magic and everything like that. And then here we get to see a nice little sneak peek of the mounted, well, not necessarily the mounted combat, but just being mounted on a raptor. So raptors were another kind of a starting creature that you would end up using in Ark. I would, you know, expect that they're going to end up being a starting creature in PixARK as well. And you can see that they're trying to track down a trike. And you can see over on the left side and on the right side, we got two obelisks, both the green one and maybe that's the red or the blue obelisk. They're very, very close to one another, which tells me, just based on the description of the game, where it actually says that the maps are going to end up being randomly generated, where is it, infinite number of voxel-based maps, which tells me that we're going to have options of just choosing the size of the map, and then it's just going to end up having its limits. You know, it's going to end up having the wall of the world rather than actually being an infinite world. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the world cannot be gigantic, but we can kind of see right here, just based on the fact that these obelisks are so close to one another, it means that this most likely is going to end up being a smaller world, right? That's just my 2 cents towards it, but we do get to see a nice little preview of a sand biome right here, which is really, really cool. Seems like we got some environmental weather going on. Maybe it would end up actually causing some type of an effect very similar to the sand downloadable content or the desert downloadable content in Ark, where you would end up having to manage your character's heat. And I would expect so, because if you actually look at these characters, it looks like they're kind of wearing you know, clothes that kind of is very lightweight, kind of light leather and stuff. But very cool that we get to see that all of the arrows are actually sticking out of the stego right there. So that's always a nice little touch. I always love seeing my attacks actually weighing in on the creatures. And you can also see that based on the character right here that's kind of standing right up in the face of the stego with a spear in hand. And then the main character that we've got going on right here in third person kind of has the spear over their shoulder. I'm expecting that we're going to have, very similar to Ark, spears that you can end up just throwing. So it's going to end up being both a weapon that you can use just outright and a consumable ammo that you can end up using. And not to mention the character on the left ended up using a bow. And then we kind of get to see a little bit of a sneak peek of the stuff that was in the background right there. But now we get to see that the characters are starting to go underground. We get to see this wizard character actually has a magic staff, and more so that has to do with the fact that I'm pretty sure that there's going to end up being different skill trees, because if we end up taking a quick peek at one of the screenshots on the Steam page right down here, you can see we kind of got a more tech gear, right? So we kind of got this guy who's in like crazy armor. It's glowing green, and he's got like full-on sniper rifle, which looks like it's an augmented long neck rifle rather than actually being a sniper rifle. You can kind of see a sneak peek in the background too, that there's a dinosaur in the background that looks like it's on fire. So maybe that could possibly end up being an alpha. methinks. I'm not exactly sure, but I wanted to point this out, that the green on the armor, you can actually see very similar looking green color palette is actually in the background right here. That's not a tree that ended up generating up here. That's actually a piece of land that ended up generating, kind of just floating in the air. But maybe this is possibly a unique ore to whatever biome they're in, or it could end up just being something really rare. Maybe it's a requirement for that weird metal armor. Maybe we could see a return of tech armor or some type of late tier armor getting into the game. I don't exactly know. This is very interesting. I don't even know what this is, but this definitely looks like some type of a unique area. Maybe it's like player built islands or something like that, but it begs the question, because we do have a slide right here, which does look very much 3D rather than actually being like limited to just one block and a staircase all the way down, right? And you can kind of see with all the bridges and stuff. And if we take a little bit of a sneak peek over here, you can see that there's some type of an icon on the right, which tells me that that possibly could end up being like a world that you end up warping to, that maybe is going to end up having like a bunch of unique sales or shops or something like that. Because if we look on the left side right here across the bridge, we've got another little parchment. Maybe it's actually related to questing, because the game actually does also mention that it's going to end up having right here procedurally generated quests, and it does actually show this portal up in the sky with the character wearing some really cool looking armor. And what I'm wondering is the game going to end up having it so that you can go to that portal and maybe you warp into another dimension that's going to end up being another random generated world, just so that the game kind of has that continued replay ability where you're going to end up getting to experience new parts of the game while still being able to go back to your home base, which is going to be the main island that potentially could end up being, you know, just out and out used up to an insane degree. Like maybe you played on the map for a year and you've got it completely used up. However, if we actually take a quick peek at the beginning of this clip, on the right we've got the green obelisk. So this could even be as simple as floating islands. Maybe it's just another type of biome generation, but I would assume that it's some type of a different you know, mode or a dungeon, or maybe it's even just a different game mode that's kind of more survival based, because you do notice that there actually are tons of creatures in the background and stuff, and each of these floating islands seems to actually be a different biome. So we can kind of see that there's a desert biome over here with some type of cats and terror birds and stuff like that. And then if we look very quickly on the left side, we've actually got an underwater area where we can see the silhouette of not only a shark, but possibly a giant squid. Maybe I'm really overanalyzing this here, but I think it could be really, really awesome if this was just a type of generation that you could end up seeing. However, we do see all the mountains and stuff in the background, but that potentially could just be, you know, the background. Maybe it's not something you can actually get to. However, you can see back here we got kind of a T-Rex and maybe a turtle creature that is kind of floating off in the distance of an ungenerated chunk. And we know that those turtles are actually in the game, because if we look right here, we can see that the turtles from ARK are going to end up being in the game in this animated little GIF. And then if we go back up to the screenshots over on this screenshot right here, you can see just on the left underneath the Bronto's face, we've got more of the turtles going on. We also have a glowing creature right here, kind of a ghost type of creature, a spirit creature that is, you know, obviously going to be something that you can tame, because you can see saddles on all these other creatures, and why wouldn't they be fighting each other? You can see another workbench, also very similar gardening mechanics that we've seen in ARK. All of the trees in the background imply that it's actually player-built base, and then we've got a player base built in the background as well. So let's continue onward. Here we get to see an actual underground zone, which most likely is going to end up being the base of the world, because, you know, Minecraft kind of said it first, right? Where it's like lava's got to be down at the bottom. And we get to see that weird green ore again, which is not necessarily the exact same one that we saw in the clip 2 seconds ago, but it is cool to note that it is actually, you know, there are going to end up being harder resources to get, but we do get to see that there is the same wizard character. We get to see that another character in the background is kind of wearing more warrior armor with horns and stuff, and then this guy right in the middle is what I'm interested in, because it looks like he's kind of wearing more tech armor or something. Not necessarily tech armor, but technical, where it looks like it's kind of a paintball suit or something. And then we get to see a Pegasus right here. Absolutely awesome. The biome generation looks a lot more unique and a lot cooler right here, where we get to see not only the red obelisk, but the green obelisk as well. And then we get to see a bunch of loot crates coming down over in the distance and stuff. And then whatever type of biome this is going to end up being, potentially being unique to this one creature, because that's the one thing that's really interesting is the fact that the world's going to be random generated means that we're going to end up seeing the creatures generate in random spots as well. Obviously, they're going to be biome specific, but I'm wondering, where are you going to actually see this Pegasus? Is it going to be unique to this weird plateau area? Can a world even generate with the Pegasus? Is it always going to generate with it, or is it something that's just a very rare world generation that you have to come across sometime while you're exploring and stuff? Who knows? But that is definitely a beautiful mount to be sure. And then we get to see right here, 2 raptors running away from a T-Rex. T-Rex is absolutely awesome in Ark, so I'm sure that it's going to end up being absolutely devastating if you can end up taming one of those bad boys in this game as well. We get to see a little bit of the night exploration right here with the characters using torches. The dynamic lighting looks absolutely beautiful. And then we get to see these other characters right here, again, rocking all sorts of different weird-looking gear. We got this guy that looks like he's got gear from a tiger creature, so possibly it could end up being just a unique tiger in general, or maybe it's just this monster right here. Maybe you're going to end up killing certain enemies to end up getting certain pieces of armor, or it's going to end up just being like Ark, where you kill this guy, he's going to give you fur, and then potentially that's just fur armor right there. It's not going to necessarily be specific to that creature, you know what I mean? We get to see another staple hold creature of Ark, the Quetzal, and he's got a platform saddle on his back. Not only does he have a platform saddle, but unfortunately we do see the foundation blocks again, so we do, you know, we probably are going to end up having to use the foundation blocks in order to actually build a base on top of it. And you can see in the top left, we actually got a pterodon. Is that what they're called? It's actually just a pterodactyl, kind of one of the more basic mounts that you end up getting. It is not going to end up being the same as the Quetzal. You can kind of just see by its silhouette. So very cool that they actually have those guys in the game. Now, we're wondering whether or not this is going to end up having the same flight mechanics as Ark does currently, where in older versions of Ark, flying creatures, you would be able to improve their movement speed, and the Terrabird ended up being, or Pterodon, I mean, would end up being a pretty fast flyer, and the Quetzal, you know, was kind of like in between, where the reason that you would use it is because it could end up carrying a base on its back. And, you know, are we going to see that same mechanic again where we can improve the movement speed, or is it going to be like modern Ark is now, where each of the flying creatures is just going to have their own set speeds? And then we get to see all those crystals and stuff like that in the background as well. As soon as we get to this next clip, very, very exciting, because we get to see a character riding on a Carno, some dude that's actually rocking some type of goblin armor, but more importantly has an assault rifle. This further explains that the game is going to end up having different tiers, because we actually get to see in first person the character is using a fire staff, and then we get to see another character down here riding what looks to be some type of a tiger creature or something like that. I'm not sure, but thankfully we do see a Cyclops. And why do I say thankfully? Because I'm really excited at the fact that the game seems to be harboring both medieval technical armor and mystical all rolled into one, which is kind of one of the things that was so cool about Ark in its development, because back in the day it was just dinosaurs. Now it's been mythological creatures and stuff like that. So it's really cool to see that we also are going to end up having a magic tree that we can end up going down, right? And we got our flying bird in the background. Potentially it could end up being, I don't know, that looks like an Argentavis to me, honestly speaking. It's just really, really far in the background, so it's really tough to tell. But we do get to see that this Cyclops creature is rocking a big old club, so I don't know whether or not it's going to end up being a creature you can tame, or is it just going to end up being a creature that you fight. Up next, we got one of the most exciting scenes. We get to see a gigantic Minotaur, which, I mean, look at this monster compared to the character. Obviously, the character is one block lower in the environment than actually standing toe-to-toe with this big bad boy, but I love the fact that the character model itself is kind of like, I love the art direction of this game, how the characters and everything like that are kind of built out of voxels, but kind of smoothed out. And I think it's absolutely awesome that the player right here is going to be using a rocket launcher to actually not only defeat it, but to blast it into oblivion. You can see it shatters into a million pieces, as true to form as any voxel game should be. And we actually get to see that not only that, but the creature ended up dropping a bunch of loot. You can kind of tell by the sound effects that we got going on. We can see some meat right here, and a bunch of other different resources. You know, potentially we could see different creatures where you would get their weapons from them. I'm not exactly sure. But then we get to see this town right here, which At first I thought that this was player made, but then as we take a little bit of a peek right here, we can see that a character is actually trading with a goblin down here. So potentially this could end up being a world or a town that ended up just generating out in the world, possibly very similar to the ice dungeon that we ended up talking about a few minutes ago, right? But we do get to see a water fountain right here, which very cool that the game seems like you're going to be able to build water in specific locations. Now, why this is relevant is just because in Ark you couldn't really change the terrain very much, and you most definitely couldn't make your own waterfalls. It seems like this is going to be very similar to Minecraft, where you can actually pick up a water block in some way, shape, or form. But we get to see that there's all these other characters. We got a guy over in iron armor with a sword and shield, so there is definitely going to be sword and shield combat. Another guy rocking a Raptor, and then in the background we get to see some glowy tech stuff, which possibly could end up being some type of redstone or electronics. We're not exactly sure about that yet. But if we go a little bit further in the video, you can see that there is another kind of merchant type of deal right here, and we do get to see these kind of wine or alcohol barrels over on the left, kind of a distillery or something, which I would expect because Ark ended up having distilleries in and stuff like that. And again, furthermore to the beginning of the video where we looked at the staircases, it doesn't look like the staircases can invert just because we've got this naturally generated house that is not actually using inverted staircases. It doesn't mean that it can't happen in the future. I just wouldn't really expect it. It does definitely beg the question, though, is this going to end up being a naturally generated town? I don't know, but we can kind of see in the background right here, these kind of glowing trees and possibly a floating island back here is going to end up being very similar to the Pegasus that we saw 2 seconds ago, the trees that were in the background there, right? So possibly this could end up all being footage from the same map. I wouldn't put it past them to actually do something like that. And if it is going to end up being that varied, that could be absolutely awesome. So we get to see a bit of the same town in the daytime from a different angle, because right back here we also have the fountain and the little goblin trader and that same biome that we just talked about 2 seconds ago. And then on the left we have a cooking pot, so that's going to be a cooking station for cooking various soups and stuff like that. We got that dude that was using the rocket launcher 2 seconds ago, and then on the right looks to me like we got a proper smithy or a forge going on in the background too. And then this is like the all-time just absolutely awesome scene of the entire trailer, is the fact that we got this castle right here that, if we overanalyze it, is really, really cool, because we've got a drawbridge right here that actually seems like it does have mechanics. So I'm not going to say as far as like redstone or something, but at the least we are going to be able to have something like this to animate in the world. And it's really, really awesome that we've got this castle generated right here, which it definitely looks like it's generation, because we've got, kind of the red obelisk in the background to make it look really, really scenic. And then also just the fact that these dragons are here. Possibly this could actually be one of the procedurally generated quests where you have to like liberate a town's castle from dragons or something. I'm not sure. But we also have these weird looking triangle props up at the top that I'm wondering whether or not it's something that the player is going to be able to actually build, because we do also see proper slanted roofs up at the top that aren't actually going to end up being the same as the stairs. And then more importantly than that, dragons. So we've got wyverns making an appearance. Honestly speaking, they look like they're operating the exact same as Ark does, where they're kind of looking off to the side as the dragons usually do. And whether or not they're going to end up handling like a truck when you actually get them mounted remains to be seen. But that is PixARK, everybody. Absolutely excited about this game. It's supposed to be hitting early access in late March, so we'll just have to wait and see what happens when it does end up coming out, both on Steam and Xbox One. Thanks for watching though, folks. Hopefully you enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to like, share, favorite, and subscribe for more daily content that's also going to build up loyalty points to my merch store. Links are in the description for that. And for the fans that want to go the extra mile, you can donate to me for absolutely free with Gawkbox. Check links in the description again. Sayonara, and stay epic, everybody.